Hi, folks. It's really good to see you. Welcome. I have Stephen Halford with me. Hi, Stephen. How are you doing?
I'm well, Langley. Yourself?
I'm okay. It's really, really good to have you with us. I'm keen for people to understand that you are Stephen Halford, husband to Susan Halford. So it's like you're appearing in a court case, isn't it? No. So what kind of things did you make beyond saddles? I'm aware you mentioned before that because I was going to say you'd done stuff for circuses.
Done stuff for circuses. We've done stuff for cars, stuff for boats, fashion, handbags, hats, gloves. I remember doing. Somebody turned up one day with a load of rabbit skins and asked for hats and gloves to be made for his wives and daughters. We've done bespoke handbags. I remember doing one for a lady who did a lot of secretarial work. This handbag held an Archleaf A4 folder. So you can imagine how big this handbag was. I think if you swung it at you, she would absolutely kill you. It was huge. Gun cases, cases for perfumes and cosmetics. I remember doing basically anything and everything we used to.
So the focus is not the horses I've met, although horses was
the primary thing.
Major area. The focus is working with leather, right? And now I'm kind of with you, because that's, well, as soon as you mention kind of car seats, you look at these car programs, don't you, when they're doing restorations and they have to turn to somebody to actually physically go and stitch. It wasn't sustainable, or had to diversify. So what else did you end up doing? I'm aware about from Susan. I'm aware about the eggs, because Susan used to grade eggs, and I'm aware that you used to work in the egg industry, but I don't know much more. So what kind of, how did you diversify after that then?
Well, foot and mouth sort of killed the trade off back in the 90s, sorry. Then I went to work as an upholsterer for a while, allied trade. Then a phone call, brother-in-law needed some help, and his salesman decided to retire in a rush, so could I go and help them? So that was, I went to help them out for 16 years. But my primary role was sales. I would load the van up with eggs in the morning and then disappear and hopefully come back with an empty van at night. So that was the best part of a ton and a half of eggs a day. I used to move on somewhere, bakers, restaurants, cafes, supermarkets, corner shops, all sorts of different.
A ton and a half of eggs.
Ton and a half of eggs.
And I'm intrigued. So what would presumably a local supermarket, how many would a local supermarket take in a day?
Oh, I mean, I can think of some customers I'd go twice a week and they would have, one of the biggest customers would have 1/4 of a ton of eggs a week.
Right, so we're talking a lot of eggs
a week.
Now, therefore, I'm thinking safe driver. But I want to know about egg disasters. It's got to be done.
What springs to mind, I will admit, is one Monday night, I remember it so well, the bottom of the boxes were taped up and somebody forgot to take the box. So I picked the box up and sort of took a step or so, and all of a sudden it just went clunk.
Right.
30 dozen, 360 eggs in one pile on the floor, on a concrete floor. You can imagine dropping an egg in your kitchen. Multiply that by 360. It is one heck of a mess.
And what's the quickest way to clear up an egg? Just out of interest, is there a quick way, or you just accept defeat?
Well, in that case, it's a shovel. They say put salt on it. I've never tried, but no, it's just a gooey mess.
I can't imagine. And I mean, you're trying to draw up a liquid that's actually an emulsifier that's going to react. I mean, it's not going to be soaked up like water, is it? Nope. Oh, gross.
Loopy.
And driving, any accidents whilst driving and carrying said eggs?
I've had the odd one go over, but you suddenly realise once you've had a bit of a mishap once, you don't do it again. If you stack them too high and one just tips over and you drop an egg or two, it just sticks everything together. So you soon become very cautious how you drive, a very defensive driver. And you just make sure that everything is nice and level and nicely stacked. You just don't want the hassle of
So would you say that you're quite a calm driver regularly?
I suddenly became a lot steadier driver than I was before. Let's put it that way.
And I'm also intrigued because it's very, very rare that I think people get to crack open a rotten egg, but I have managed to crack open one on one occasion, and the stench is unbelievable. I mean, how does that happen? An egg going rotten. I mean, do you have any big problems? Because presumably you're taking them from the factory straight. You know,
I mean the turnover. It was they weren't in the on the farm. What you'd grade one day. I mean, the longest you maybe have. They may grade them on a Thursday, / Friday, and they go out Monday. That'd be about as long as we basically constant turnover.
And what makes it? I mean, it's peculiar because an egg will sit. I mean, it's porous, isn't it? You know, the shell is porous. So what makes it go off? I mean, do you know? I mean,
yeah. If you've got free range chickens and one lays one in the corner of the field somewhere, and it's there for a few weeks, it'll go off, and it smells like it's sulfur, isn't it? It absolutely
it stinks. It's hydrogen sulfide. And it's just like the minute I was doing not boiled eggs, I was doing poached eggs at a time, which was really bad. But whether it was poached or whether it would be fried, the fact that as soon as I cracked it open, it was just so vile. I had to be out the door, and I was retching already. So yeah. So that all intrigues me. And then since then, work. So you mentioned upholstery, and other areas, and
I've worked in the food industry as well, which is obviously around here. There's a lot of food industry. I've worked in the meat industry, produce, as well as the eggs. So I've had now I'm working within the blind industry, as in curtain shutters, window blinds, that sort of thing. Sales, fitting, surveying, even help with the manufacturer from time to time.
So when I listen to your story, effectively it's all very personal stuff. It's personal as in you're using your own skills immediately, whether you're sewing something or measuring something, but it's also personal because you're relating to customers all the time.
Yeah, most of what I've done is customer facing. Yeah.
So you must have so you must have some funny memories of customers. Have you got anything that you're able to share without offending anyone?
Oh, that's you just with the horse world, they're all characters, and they're just such a wide range of people you'd come across. We work from circuses, the travelling community. They can be interesting. We work for big business. We work for people like Glaxo Wellcome, Bass Brewery, people who run riding stables, racehorse stables, breeding studs, to somebody who's got a pony in the backyard. So it was just total variety. The world basically came to us.
That's a really good phrase, actually. The world came to us. I think I'm gonna return to that later and nick it. The world came to us. So I'm also mindful, if you don't mind me saying, because I think it must be an important aspect of your journey or something that you've adapted to throughout your life. I'm also aware, because we've talked before, that whilst you're very, very practical, you're also severely dyslexic.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really interested to hear what was school like. How did school go?
I mean, school was school. I was fine with the woodwork, metalwork, sciences, maths. I was fine with English, geography, sort of history, the sort of more written stuff. Not so. But you find strategies. You just find different ways of working around problems. Reading depends what it is. It's not necessarily it's a lightweight book or heavyweight book. It's more the style it's written in. Does it flow? Is it very stunted? If it's very stunted and you can't get a flow to it, it becomes more difficult. Or there's an easy solution to all this. You should marry a secretary and she does all the writing for you.
Well, I think it is interesting because I remember my mother-in-law, bless her, she was absolutely lovely, and she'd been a teacher, and she said really honestly, because my wife's also dyslexic, um, but said, well, if in my age you'd just be labelled thick, you
Yeah.
know, and it did really make me, it did really make me think about how times have changed and how we adapt, but also it's how people, because you can be quite high functioning and severely dyslexic, how people adapt, and not only just how people adapt and get on, how people excel and get on. Well, I think is it Richard Branson, Alan
Yeah.
Sugar, we have
Jackie Stewart.
yeah.
I mean, I had a conversation with Jackie Stewart. He says he could go around Nuremberg racetrack and tell you all the braking distances, not a problem. Recite his alphabet, not a chance. Just couldn't do it. Formula One Grand Prix, represented England at clay pigeon shooting, but couldn't recite his alphabet. Very high functioning, but it's just your brain is wired slightly different. You look at problems slightly different. You adapt, you change. Susan, if she's preaching, she reads everything. I can't.
No.
The big thing for me is if you want me to challenge me, and I always challenge myself in services, I always read something. Might only be a short passage, might be a prayer, but I always challenge myself to read something aloud in public, which is a big thing for me.
I mean, that's sort of amazing and speaks volumes for you about how you're continually pushing with it as well. And are you conscious at times that you're finding, so for example, my kind of is completely different. My big weaknesses is I'm absolutely useless with names, and I was really conscious about it until I met somebody else who was very well qualified but equally useless with names, and I just said, how do you get around it? And the big embarrassing one for me is remembering somebody's name if you're introducing them to somebody else. And he just said, well, all I say is this is, and I gesture as if that person whose name I forgot is going to introduce themselves to the other person, get on with it. And he was so kind of matter of fact about it. But for me, I would be absolutely, and it's infuriating because I remember people's faces so well. And of course, in my line of work and in your line of work as well, people will remember you, but you'll have far more people that you kind of interact with. It's one in the sea of faces. So I'm really good. So I cope that, and I'm conscious about that. Have you been conscious about how you adapt with your dyslexia? Or is it just something that has just come naturally?
It's something I didn't realise I was dyslexic at school because it didn't exist. It was only until my son was diagnosed as dyslexic that I go, that's how I am. And it suddenly it made sense. Once you sort of got a name to put on it, I could start thinking more about actually, how do I find strategies? How do I cope? I remember being in a Christian community with a chap. He was a senior manager for Inland Revenue, dealing with some very high profile Inland Revenue cases. And giving presentations. So we got talking. I said, well, how do you do it? He said, well, if you're writing on a whiteboard, which is, for me, would be an absolute nightmare. He says, I used to have in my mind a list of words I could spell. And he would put the answer there. He'd think the answer through to what people would most likely say and find a word that he could spell to put on the whiteboard. He found a strategy to actually make, and you do, right. you work out different strategies, and my strategies have changed over the course of time.
And of course, I do find it beautifully ironic and wonderfully kind of kingdom-like that somebody who's so heavily involved in coaxing and tutoring and mentoring, because we all do that, even if we have those roles. I mean, there is the local tutor mentor role and the tutor role, I know, but we all do that. That somebody that's in a crucial position to encourage that is actually coming from a point where they're dyslexic first, in a tradition that was very oral, very cerebral, and used to say, I did blue folder, which was a training course,
with the exams,
with the exams, and it was write down, number one, context and background, original meaning for today. We rehearsed this with Susan, and I know the course has changed now, because now it'll say, well, there's multiple ways in which you can explore this. What medium will you use? So I can see how it works, but I'm also, I kind of have felt really, really frustrated, because I think now if somebody comes along and they have dyslexia or another learning difference, that is much easier, more easily accommodated for.
I mean, I suppose one of the advantages I've got, I don't assume everybody can learn the same way, because I can't. I'm very aware how me and Susan are different in our learning and approaches to things. So I suppose we both come to it knowing that actually not everyone learns the same way. You know, the question you have to ask yourself is actually, how does this person learn best? You know, are they somebody who just thrives on essays? No, give them a stack of books, a load of essays, and they're happy. Is it somebody that actually needs to no, they think out loud? You know, actually, you think about how people do learn, how they actually do interact with, and the new course is fantastic. It's got video clips of comedians. There's a video clip of what they call the three amigos. It's a rabbi, an imam, and a evangelical pastor.
Wow.
Together after 9/11, and they do a three-handed act, if you will, but on faith, and they are fantastic. There's a lot of written stuff at different levels. And the course is actually a lot more about Methodism and its background than there was in the old blue folder.
Right.
But there's all sorts of different learning styles within the course, and actually you can use your different learning styles. And some people go, I can't do a prayer station, or I can't do a bit of work of art, but I can do an essay. Well, actually, you only do one essay, so you've got to
That's right.
got to try doing a prayer station. And some people are going, I can't do an essay. Well, okay, you might do an essay. How about doing a newsletter article? Well, I might be able to do that. And actually, it can encourage people to explore and challenge themselves in what they do and what they think they can do. So it's actually, I will admit, I think the course is not easy. And I would not say it is in any way, shape or form. If any local preacher wants to have a go, please, I can give you access. Anyone wants to have a go for that matter. But actually, it does really make you question and think, and that's how it's geared up. It's small groups, explore group, and you discuss themes around that particular module, and that's how it's a lot more interactive. It's not just going back before the blue folder. It's just you read the books, you wrote your essays, and away you went.
Yeah.
This is a lot more experience involved, a lot more thinking about how you do things. There's one session on prayer, and they get you to pray without words, just using your body language. Things like that, and you go, "Oh, I'm not comfortable. That feels uncomfortable." But actually, if you get into it, you're thinking, "Okay, if people don't use language or can't use language, can they express themselves?"
So it really, yes. And I kind of think, you know, oddly enough, having finished my doctorate some time back, that was a laugh, which it was pretty, that kind of the traditional route is pretty cerebral, pretty oral, having to defend yourself. And I mean, it was focused around a practical question, but one of the things that would interest me is going back and doing the new local preachers course, you know, because I have the privilege of seeing people start. I mean, I give them the note to preach, and then interviewing midterm, and then having a conversation midterm, which is usually around calling, and then a conversation at the end, which is much more kind of bringing it together. And they're wonderful high points in those testimonies. But apart from that, I hear your reports, but I'm not a part of the group. So one day, maybe one day I could do the course. Now, we've strayed a bit into church here, but what I'm really interested in is let's just explore a bit about your faith. And sometimes we have repeatedly talked about people coming to faith, and what's interested me so far is that it doesn't seem to matter if somebody was a cradle churchgoer or if they came to it from outside. Everyone seems to talk about seems to be able to point to a moment where faith became more real to them than it had done ever before. Whether you call that conversion, I don't know, but I'm interested in your journey. So were you involved in the life of the Methodist Church from being a wee lad?
No.
No.
Going on odd occasions to the Anglican, the Abbey here at Crowden Sunday School. For the two thoughts I have. My aunt used to be Sunday school teacher, so I think she took me along, and I remember all things bright and beautiful. That's my only recollection. Then I met Susan, and when she used to go along with her parents to their local, like as a dutiful boyfriend, I would tag along, and that's all. To be honest, all I was doing was just going to, be with Susan.
So that's great. So we've got model 2, the dutiful boyfriend model.
Yeah.
It's a new model, you see. We've got the cradle model, the dutiful boyfriend model, which is almost close to had no involvement with church before. But go on, I'm really intrigued.
Then things moved on. We got married, and Susan, as she said in a sort of interview, she taught me into going to church. And like her, I left the church saying, never, no way am I ever going back there again. As Susan said, no one spoke to us. It was a hell and damnation sermon. I remember this image. But the strange thing was, I'm a local. I'm born and bred, as was my mother and her mother. So I'm as local as you're going to get, really. And no one spoke. And I thought, that's it, fine, done with church. And as Susan said, she took the children along. The business was between home and church. So I walked to the business. I went and did an hour or so pottering in the shop and did some bits and pieces, and met her when they finished. So that was fine. High days and holidays, nativity services, that sort of thing when the children were involved. But as Susan said, when she came to faith, there was a change, and it was a change. It wasn't a little bit, that's something different. This is a major shift. And I suppose that major shift got me to start thinking, hang on, is there something in this faith, religion, church, Jesus, lark or not? And I suppose the question just sat there and niggled away a little bit. So I started going along a bit more regularly. And I suppose through that, I started asking more and more questions. And then I used to go along to Susan, to the small groups she was involved in, and it became a bit more, okay, yeah, there's something in this, and it became real for me. And the odd thing was, in recent years, I never thought I was a Methodist, but actually I've discovered I am far more of a Methodist than I ever realised. My mother was Methodist, went to Thorney. She died when my father was young, so I have no recollection of this. Her grandfather was a local preacher back in the turn of the end of the 19th century. He went from being illiterate to teaching himself to read so he could read the Bible to become a local preacher. So I'm steeped in Methodism, although I didn't even know I was. But I mean, the journey has been, I say, interesting. It showed me so much about others and myself that I would never have got without coming to know Jesus in a real and personal relationship.
So if we can just rewind it, if folks haven't had the chance to look at Susan's interview, have a look at Susan's interview, because she talks about there seemed to be 3 factors that drew her to faith. One was how she'd been introduced to church as a child, but had sort of fallen away like a lot of us as teenagers. And she looked at her own children, and one of the younger ones was 4, I think. It was 4.
Yeah. 2 and 4 when they started, yeah.
2 and 4, and then there was somebody in the fruit and veg shop who continually managed to talk about Jesus.
Yep.
But not in an offensive.
Played darts with many years previous, yes.
Yeah, precious. And then there was the early experience of church, which is no reflection on Crowland Methodist Church whatsoever, because it's really common that people go along to church and their first thing is, for all kinds of reasons, oh crikey, get me out of here as quick as possible. I mean, church is quite a challenging place to be, but nevertheless, she went back but it was reading the gospel that did it. She read the gospel, and she said to me that she was an addicted reader. She was so addicted. She'd talk about reading one book on, whilst she was doing the dishes and having another one ready. And she said it actually, she said it really put a strain on your marriage.
Oh, it did. Oh, I mean, Susan, you almost had to surgically remove a book from her. I've seen her iron with a book. I've seen her wash up. I've seen her cook food. She would never be more than arm's length from a book. She'll be up all hours of the night reading. I remember one case. I woke up at sort of 2 a.m. She sat in bed with the bedside light on reading. I couldn't get back to sleep, so I went downstairs and laid on the settee. She was absolutely, totally addicted, and it stopped.
And she said that it stopped once it was the reading of the Gospels.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's flicking a switch, maybe an exaggeration, but not by much.
Yeah. So you'd seen that, and that's crucial, isn't it? The witness of a faithful spouse and then you talked about knowing Jesus sort of personally. Let's just unpack that a little bit. So how did that come about? You seem to have had a sort of slow, gradual journey.
As Susan said, she was reading the Bible. Hey, Stephen, listen to this. And you went, yeah, just that's fine. You do, that's your thing. You go and do it. I know I was being prayed for. After the event, I found out I was regularly being in hers and others' prayers. And it was a slow burn. I remember them dyslexic. Susan gave me a Bible when I first showing a bit of interest, and there was a reading plan in it. I thought, I'm going to go for this reading plan. Now wait for it. It was the whole New Testament in 2 years.
Right.
Boy, that was a struggle. But I got through it. I mean, I suddenly found myself weeks behind how to catch up. But I did it in a similar way, but mine was a lot slower. But it was, a gradual realization of this person of Jesus, that actually he was alive. It was talking to people whose story Susan's change was dramatic, and speaking to others whose change was even more dramatic. You start thinking, this is it. Then you encounter him for yourself. And I remember we did a song. There's a Songs of Praise at Crowland, and it was hymns ancient and modern was the theme. And being a bit as I am, I said, well, if we're going to have modern hymns, we're going to have modern hymns, modern songs. So all I did, I knew people. I'm a local. I know people. So I made a load of phone calls and said, you play guitar, you sing, you da. How about, Christians from all different denominations who lived in Crowland? I'm up for that. And everyone can make that particular Sunday. I said, well, how about a rehearsal? Oh, yeah. So we set a rehearsal in the chapel. And all I did was just get them together. Here's the stuff. And I sat back and listened. And the presence of Jesus by the Holy Spirit was the first real time it hit me majorly. And I walked out there and my feet did not touch the floor. It was something so special. There was something so special in there, and it was a personal encounter just through sitting and listening to a rehearsal. Nothing spectacular at all. It wasn't deeply theological. It was just people sharing their love of Jesus through music, and that was something that made a real impact on my life. And so I thought, actually, this is real. I had an encounter with God. Susan spoke about disciple, and the minister at the time asked if I would do something, and I said, I'll think about it, thinking I couldn't think of a good excuse not to do it. So I was driving to work in a beat up little Fiesta we had at the time, and I was just having a bit of a chunter really about how can I not do this, whatever I can't even remember what it was, to be honest, but it was I remember sort of, I suddenly had this sense of God sitting next to me in a Fiesta. And there's not a lot of room in a Fiesta. And the phrase I used in that group the night before came flooding back to me. It's about, you ask people to do things that you know they'll say yes. And I could just sense him going, that's what you said, now get out of it. And he was having a good laugh at my expense, if you like. And it was so real that he was so close and prompted me to, look, you said it, hey, come on. You know, one of the answers to prayer is get on and do it yourself. And that's very much that sort of response. And it was instances like that that actually sort of, yeah, this is real. You know, it's not just Susan's thing. It's for me, and it's for all of us. It's just the experiences you have over, for me, over a journey. It wasn't a bang, you know, Damascus Road experience. It was seeing the change and asking the question, what's going on? Then actually over the time experiencing it for, you know, I suppose you have to put yourself into the position to experience it. You know, allowing yourself to ask the questions, you know, to be in places where people will go, well, what do you think? You know, and actually you can say to them, don't get this, what do you make of this? And actually being able to be in those sort of conversations, I think was very important to me.
I think you said two things. I mean, you said a lot of it's just been lovely just in this first half, just to hear a lot about your previous experience, which I never knew, but then so much adds up and makes sense. And then you mentioned earlier the world used to come to Crowland, and which really struck me, of course, because we believe God is with us, and not this, maybe it's not quite right to match the world, but the whole thing about the world coming to you and God being in the world, perhaps, you know, therefore the sense of God coming to you, that's what struck a chord with me. Emmanuel, God is with us. And then the other thing is, yeah, this kind of growing realization, it being okay to have a growing realization, but there was that moment when you sense God's presence close. And the two one that really speak to me in the ordinariness of it, just a simple band rehearsal, but in that moment, for whatever reason, bang, you sense the God's present. And, you know, as you said in your own words, you kind of, your feet didn't touch the ground. But the one that I love, the throwaway line, Stephen, that I love is, the conversation with the minister, and that you experience the presence of a car in a Fiesta, and bear in mind a Fiesta's quite a small car, not a lot of space in a Fiesta. So
how the old ones are even smaller than the modern ones, but it was seconds. It was all it could have been was but that sudden presence, that feeling, that sensation. And I can almost hear him laughing at my expense. You know, God has a sense of humour. You know, he used my own words back at me. He's like, get out of that there. That's what you said. Well, no, sort of put up and shut up a little bit, really. But it was just the way, the interaction I felt I had with God at that time. It was one of those things that you have the dark times, you have the low times, but when you think back to that, you're thinking, yeah, it's just brilliant.